Hello and welcome to University Radio York. My name is Joe Braley and I'm joined by Jess Rolfe. Today we are in the studio with the University of York's Vice-Chancellor, Charlie Jeffrey, and the President of the Student Union, Pierrick Rodger.
We're here to talk about the issues that are facing students at the university now and in the upcoming academic year, notably the effect of industrial action on students, the cost of living in York, semesterisation, and to signpost where students can access support from the university and USU. So welcome to the studio. How are we doing this afternoon?
Great to be here, thanks.
Awesome. So we'll jump right into it. We'll start with one of the biggest issues that students are sort of facing this term, which is obviously the marking and assessment boycott and the ongoing industrial action. And so the biggest current concern for students and the worry for students at the moment, I think, is academic progression and graduation. Is there any sort of clarification as to whether or not students will be progressing, or is there going to be graduation this summer? Anyone wants to? Charlie can start.
There'll be a graduation this summer.
Mm-hmm.
We're certainly going to celebrate the achievements of our students. One of the big challenges about industrial action, and we should talk about the causes of it as well, not just the consequences, is that people are not required to give notice in advance that they're doing it. So we don't actually know who is boycotting. We're getting a bit of a picture, and it's certainly not going to affect all students. In fact, in quite a few departments, practically no effect will be visible. In some there'll be a bit, and perhaps two or three there might be quite significant impacts. So the crucial thing is, don't expect that there will be a problem. And if there is a problem, then we'll be looking at how we can manage it. But I think most students will be unaffected.
We did have some concerns come in when we asked for questions about international students who need marks to apply for visas. Do you have any sort of insight on that issue at all? Or?
Well, that's one of the crucial things that we're looking at. This kind of action is designed to be tough. The aim is to stop progression and graduation. And that can have really significant consequences. So one of our biggest concerns will be working around those cases where the consequences could be really difficult, complications with visas and so on, to do what we can to mitigate. Now, I know I've been talking to some of our heads of departments who are dealing with these things. They're working really, really hard to find alternative examiners. Some heads of department, I think, are doing quite a bit of extra marking themselves. So we are going to do what we can to make sure that students can progress. And in those cases where that might not be possible, then we're certainly happy to engage with the visa authorities or with employers or with other universities who might have offered places dependent on a particular grade to make sure that we can smooth the way.
So I guess is your message to students there not to panic just yet?
Absolutely. It's not going to be hugely widespread, and we will do what we can where students are affected.
Pierrick, I know you said you had a Financial Times article earlier. Do you get a lot of sort of correspondence from students saying they're worried about this specific area?
It's not direct correspondence right now, essentially, because I don't think people are worried yet. And that's because they just came out of the common assessment period. I think when things are going to start ramping up is when people realise that they don't have enough grades or marks to progress or graduate. And the two cohorts right now I'm most concerned about are people who are borderline fails and who don't have enough credits to progress as of yet, and people who are about to graduate but essentially don't have enough credits to graduate. Those are the two people that the two types of people that we need to look out for. And I think if I'm correct, and Charlie will correct me if I'm wrong, Student Services will be announcing some stuff next week about progression and graduation in line with what Charlie's just said. So I don't think there should be any concern. I don't think there should be any panic. But I can understand where it's coming from.
Is that something you'd agree with, Charlie? Student Services coming out with something soon?
I don't know the detail of that, but clearly at the end of the assessment,
no speculation.
End of the assessment period, then we're collecting marks. They go to the exam boards or whichever forums, and that's when the problems become evident. I'm not sure whether next week is early enough, but you may be better informed on this than me. But we can't know the problem until we know that the marks are absent. Which is, I think, really, really unfortunate. And
Sorry.
Well, it just shows that we've got to find a way as a sector to get out of this situation.
And on the wider situation, obviously, that's what's underpinning all of this. What's York doing in this national dispute to bring this to an end, I guess? It's been going on for quite some time now.
Yeah, well, there's two bits of York in this. There's the UCU at York, which is the party to the dispute, and the university represented by me, which is the other party to the dispute. I've been working a lot in the past year in two ways. Firstly, to try and find spaces where the two sides might have common ground. And that's not so much on the money side. I'll come to the money side in a moment, the actual pay rise side. But it's about the other fights, as the UCU has called them, around casual contracts, around pay gaps, and around workload. And I've been one of the Vice-Chancellors who's been arguing, and not everybody agrees with this, that we should be looking for national frameworks in which we can address those issues, which is what the UCU has been calling for. Now, we've moved a long way on that. And negotiators on my side and on the UCU's side agreed a set of terms of reference by which this could happen, but they were sadly not accepted by the UCU membership. On the other thing, the pay side, I would love to be in a position to offer more than the 5% that's been offered for next year, given that inflation's 10%. 5% is less than 10%. The problem is that there are quite a few universities which are, I think, teetering on the edge of financial crisis, and the reason for that is the main income stream, which is home undergraduate funding, the mix of fees and grants that you get from government to support that, has been flat for a decade. It doesn't cover the costs anymore. Therefore, there's a shortfall, and therefore some universities can't pay, and we're finding it increasingly difficult. The other thing I've been doing is making the case that we've got to fix this broken system. And I think if you look on the front page of The Guardian today, Vice-Chancellors say system is broken. Well, I'm in there. I've been making this case. I was on Newsnight last week and the Today programme the week before. We've really got to get our government to accept that things are not going to continue easily the way they are, because it's stacking up all sorts of problems. Students feel they pay too much, the debt is too high, universities don't get enough money. That's a system that just doesn't work. And I think we, the VCs and the UCU, should be working together with and on government to get that message across.
Well, obviously last time there was progression on the pensions dispute. I believe a solution was found with that.
I think the pensions dispute is more or less done.
Yes.
There's a new valuation now going forward, and that's got to go through its process. But the USS, the pension scheme itself, and the people who run it, and the UCU, and the employers have all said this is looking really good. So it's pretty much dead cert that we can restore the benefits, and we might even be able to charge less for contributions. So I think that one's cleared out the way.
So
and that's
progress has
great.
been made.
Absolutely.
So are
Fantastic.
negotiations taking place this term? Is there more talks to come?
I certainly hope so. Each side nationally at the moment is kind of playing a little game, saying, the others should come to the table. No, we're at the table. No, you're not at the table. We're at the table. That's not hugely helpful. And I think there should always be an inclination to talk and to find a solution. There's been a bit of a change over the last week because the UCU's had its annual Congress. That's the Congress at which the people elected to its decision-making committees get replaced by the new lot. And some say that the newly elected group is perhaps more likely to want to negotiate around these issues than the last group. I really hope that's the case. And if it is, my side, the employer side, really need to take that opportunity.
Is there a way to bring negotiations forward? Is there anything happening to make that happen, or is it sort of a stalemate at the moment?
There's got to be the will, and remember that conference was on Saturday, Sunday? It was certainly over the last weekend. So we're only a couple of days beyond that. So I think that's got to settle down a little bit, but I do hope that provides an opportunity.
Okay.
Fantastic. So we are going to move on to the cost of living crisis facing students. So Pierrick, What actions are USU taking to battle the rising prices of food specifically?
Of food.
Food.
Well, you're just on time because we're just about to wrap up one of our last initiatives for the year, which is our fruit and root bags. Essentially, last term, what we did was give out quite a few well-being packs, and we saw that actually the one of the most popular items in those, I think we gave out about 600 away, was the food that was in it. And so this term we've chosen to scrap all of the stuff that was related to, exam stress, all of that, and reinvest it into actual like fruit, veg, because people during exams don't tend to feed themselves well. That's just the reality of
As
things.
students going through exams, I think everyone
Yeah.
here in the studio can attest.
Yeah, so we've reinvested. I think it's about it's £3,000 from USU's budget into that specifically, and we've just wrapped up today. So we should have fed 600 students, if I'm correct, in this round of action.
So how can students get involved with that? How are they eligible, or do they just apply for it?
They just apply for everyone to eligible. There's a cap on it in that you can only have one a week. That's just to make it fair for everyone. It's a first come, first served basis, so there is no eligibility criteria. If you're hungry, then we'll feed you, essentially.
Definitely. Moving on, this is for both of you. Do you think rent prices in York are becoming unreasonable?
Should I go first?
Whichever one.
I mean,
feels
yeah.
like.
Well, the data says yes. Overall, in the UK, York's student rents, have gone up the most in a single year, and that's for loads of reasons.
Is that private or university? Is that
that's
halls or-
private?
Right. Okay. Yeah.
That excludes everything from the university because that is managed centrally by the uni, and so that means we haven't seen that rise, and I don't think we will see that rise in university accommodation, at least not as steeply as we've seen in the private sector.
Yeah.
And so yes, it has gone up dramatically, and it is, for the quality that we're getting in town, it is unreasonable. And if you talk to the Landlords Association and you ask them, why has this happened, they'll give you a bunch of reasons, most of which won't make sense. Things like mortgage rates have gone up. They've gone up around the country. I don't know if they've noticed. And somehow York's the outlier here. So it has gone up, in my opinion.
Yeah. Charlie, would you agree, disagree, or are you no comment in that one?
I'm certainly not no comment.
Fantastic.
It's clear. I mean, the data that we have from our student surveys shows a curve of prices for last year, which has gone a normal distribution, starts low and middle it's high and goes back down again, and that curve has just shifted to the right. So there's been a kind of structural shift in private sector rents, that is HMO rents, the typical student terrace house, that kind of thing. But I think there are some explicable reasons for that, and some which are not absolutely explicable. I think one of the big things that faces cities with a strong visitor economy, and York clearly has that, is that there's an alternative for landlords, and it's to go into the Airbnb style market, which bizarrely is much less regulated than houses of multiple occupancy which students live in. And I think some landlords are probably doing that to escape the regulation that they would otherwise be exposed to, which adds cost. So I think that's one of the difficult drivers in this city. We're trying to work with the Landlords Association, as I know that USU is. We are working with USU in the future to get our own mechanisms to establish a bit of control, working with an organisation called Unipol, which works really effectively in other cities. And the other thing is we're working hard to try and increase the supply of accommodation in the city. Not always easy, because you have to get planning application, you have to get funding in place, but we are talking with some developers about one or two really quite big things if they come off. And we're talking with them in a really important way, because most developers come in at the top end of the market. Anything less than 200 quid a week, they're not interested in. And that's not what the city needs. I think the big need in this city is for returner accommodation for second and third years who are finding themselves priced out of the traditional market of houses of multiple occupancy, and are even more priced out of the sort of luxury end. What we need is a different style of student accommodation in the city done by private developers. Now, I'm kind of keen for what do you call a townhouse style, where you don't have all your facilities in your own bedroom. You share facilities around a floor. That means you can get more students in relative to the floor space, so you can keep the income where it needs to be. You just need to build something different. Now, I've certainly spoken with developers who are thinking about investing in the city, saying this is what we want, this is what the city needs. Obviously, it's not going to magic up by this September, but that's the plan to try and get in place over the next 2 or 3 years.
Fantastic. So is there any support that students can receive if they're struggling with their bills, especially second and third years in private accommodation?
Yeah, so this year we've got the Household Energy Grant. Obviously that only applies to students who actually pay for their bills, and that was intentional because the pot of money was quite small, which meant we had to restrict things to people who actually pay and can demonstrate that they pay their bills. Next year we're changing things up a bit, and we're focusing on rent support directly. And I'm really thankful, actually, that the Academic Registrar's Office has worked really hard with us on this. And our agreement right now, I think I can say this, I'm not too sure.
I'm told you can. I'm told you can.
Just do it.
All of the withheld pay that we've had because of strike action will be redirected to students in the form of rent support. And that means that we're redirecting quite a hefty bit of a package of money towards that and that only. Obviously, there will be criteria on it, but it does mean that we target a lot more students, especially on the lower income side of things, so that people can. I know it won't make a huge difference; it'll be a drop in the ocean, but people will be receiving support for that specifically. There's also loads of other funds that people can apply to right now, like Student Support Fund, that's always open and available for people to apply to.
Mm-hmm.
Is that for anyone who applies, or is there some specific criteria on that one as well?
There isn't any criteria. Right now, it's essentially if you're experiencing hardship for whatever reason, okay, it doesn't have to be rent, but it can be rent. You can apply to the fund. And they will support you so long as you can demonstrate that you are experiencing hardship.
Yeah.
Well, the details on that and all of the other things, including the new things when they come on, there's a cost of living pages section on the university website. So anyone who's listening who wants to know more, go there. You should find the information there.
Wonderful. Mm-hmm. So one last question on this, and it's on part-time work. So how much time do you think your average students should be spending, in part-time work to support their studies a week, let's say?
Well, there's a should and there's an is, isn't there? I think the absolute maximum, which is set out, is 20 hours a week. Now, I think if you're doing 20 hours a week and working on a full-time degree program, you're going to be pretty tired, and that may compromise your academic work. So, it would ideally be less than that. But I do know that given inflation, given the trivial increase in the value of the maintenance loan, given that many family members who would otherwise be providing support may not be able to because the cost of living is affecting them as well, that more students are being encouraged into that situation of taking on a few more hours. Now that's an understandable response to a crisis situation. I think we've got to get to the root of it again, and that is what's the government doing to support students? It's not doing very much at all, as far as I can see. That maintenance loan increase, which was 2.8% last year, I think it's 2.4% for next year, given where inflation is. That's not much. So we, the Vice Chancellors, and I suspect all others, students' unions, trade unions, will agree with this. We're arguing through our various channels that we need maintenance loans to be uprated properly, and for the most disadvantaged students, we need maintenance grants reintroduced. Now, I hope we're going to get some traction with that. We certainly want to make it a bit of an issue because there's a general election coming up next year, and parties will want to win votes from important voter groups. So we'll be kind of looking to position that in that debate. And I've got a Russell Group meeting later, and we're talking in that meeting about the kind of manifesto the Russell Group is going to set out for next year to put to the parties and to try and influence them. And that's one of the key things in it.
Fantastic. So we are going to we're going to move on to semesterization now, which is quite a sort of area of a little bit of confusion for students. So I've missed it on my sheet there. So what will be different semesters compared to terms next year? What will change for students? Who wants to go first?
Pierrick can give perhaps a different view than mine.
Yeah.
At one level, it's a different structure of the academic year. So you have longer chunks, but only 2 of them instead of the 3 that we have now. And they will work slightly differently with a consolidation week in the middle of each one, which will give students a time to catch up and reflect on the work they've done. And then for everything, there will be assessment at the end of each semester. Now, some programs have assessment at the end of everything at the end of the academic year now. That won't be the case in the future. Now, that's obviously a change. All changes are difficult. But I'd have to say that the great majority of universities in the UK and internationally work on the basis of semesters. It's not unusual, and we've been rather slow to connect to that.
Yeah.
And that's actually, in one respect, made it more difficult for our students, for example, in arranging exchange visits to universities in other countries, because terms and semesters don't fit together in the right ways.
Yeah.
So in that respect, it'll be better. I think it'll be better as it settles down. There'll be some teething troubles as we adapt to a new time scale. But it's going to enable us to put different packages of courses from different modules from different departments together in creative ways. I think it's going to open up a different kind of choice for students than we can offer in the current system.
Definitely. Pierrick, would you have any sort of different ideas on how semesterization will change, or do you think Charlie's got the main points there?
Charlie's got the main points there. I think the one thing I've been asked previously is, will I be losing teaching or will I get more teaching? You'll get the same amount of teaching, it's just spread out better. It means you don't have those huge gaps in the middle of the year, where you go home for like a month and then you just lose all connection to the university throughout that time. What Charlie said about teething issues, that's the main thing we're concerned about, in that we want to make sure that we're prioritizing things where we can see things going wrong, basically. Yeah. And that's things like students not being aware that semesters are going to change dates of term time, and booking flights to go home, for example. That's a particular concern for international students, because you've got 2 weeks, and if you book the wrong flight, then you're pretty much screwed for the rest of the term. So it's that kind of issue where we really need to dig in to make sure that we're not setting people up for failure because they didn't know the date or they didn't realize exams were going to be.
Is there anywhere where students can access the dates for next year?
Yeah, so it's all on the university website right now. And then we're slowly starting to get messaging out, comms basically to students out on both channels, I think, university and
Absolutely.
union, so that everyone's aware of what's going on, and no one's caught out in last minute change, essentially.
Yeah. Okay. So why do you think, just one last point on this, why is the university changing? So it's been with terms for so long, why is it changing now?
There's loads of issues right now. There's loads of issues. One of them, for example, is mental health, in that we aren't able to, because exams are so crammed. First off, you have people burning out. And because breaks are so long, it means people are disconnected from any services we provide. Semesters come in and mean that more people are on campus longer, but they also get more time for exams, and it means we do get to check in with them more often. And you also get more out of your degree because you're paying to be here. And I think most students, this is not a hidden secret, once the common assessment period's done, I think it finishes 3 weeks before terms ends.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Most people leave.
Yeah.
And obviously we don't want that to happen because you're spending quite a bit of money on your education. You want to have that delivered, those full 10 weeks of that last term, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Great. So obviously this term we've all been sad to hear the news about Long Boy. This was going to come
you
up.
Knew we
you
had
knew this
to,
was going
we
to come
had
up.
to bring it up.
And I've seen that you two have started fundraising for a statue in his honour. So how's that going?
Well, we're on I think we've hit £4,000 already. It keeps going up. Obviously, it's slowed down because the momentum's been lost a bit, but it hasn't even gone to alumni yet. And I think once it goes out to alumni, and people are made aware that the fundraiser exists, it'll shoot up again. And I'm really happy with it, to be honest. It's been in national press, national television.
Almost Greg James.
Almost Greg James. We're getting there, working on it.
But we've hit statue territory, haven't we? Because there were tiers of funding to get a statue. So it's happening.
Yeah, it is happening, yeah. I think I've got Charlie's support on this as well.
A PR promise there. And a Charlie Jeffrey certification of approval.
But yeah, we are getting a statue. Now, obviously, the more funds we get, the better the statue is.
Yeah.
Right now we're on 4,000, so we're either looking at recycled metal or like a clay statue. But obviously, I know people are really keen on the bronze statue because that's what I've put out on social media. I've kind of set myself up for that. But that means we need to raise more money essentially and really hit the 10K.
So is that the ultimate statue that we're aiming for?
That
bronze?
is the ultimate statue that will be on campus forever.
Doesn't the ultimate boy need the ultimate statue?
Exactly.
Whereabouts are we planning to put the statue?
Right now, my main thinking is where Long Boy lived, like near Derwent. Now, obviously, I understand that might not be possible for whatever reason. I really want it to be possible.
Is there any other places where you might be plopping it?
Yeah, so like
where are the main contenders?
Derwent's huge. I don't know if you've ever been to Derwent, but there's the huge Derwent lawns as well. I think the main reason it might not be possible is obviously because where Long Boy used to be is where loads of waterfowl hang out, and therefore it might not be feasible to actually put a statue up there. But there's loads of options, and I know a student's reached out to make a second statue. I'm hoping to put it into Heslington Hall. We're working on that.
Charlie, would you approve of that?
What do you think of that?
Well, I'm just happy to have served with the most famous duck in the world.
Absolutely. An honour.
Anything we can do to remember Long Boy in the right way, I'm up for it.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Amazing.
So, as one final point before we go, the new student centre. So, when is it due to be finished? Do you know? Is that up in the air, or is that? Have you got a date?
Eric's on the project board, so he'll know the dates more precisely than I will.
I think the original date was 2026, but I think it's been delayed 2027. Am I right?
I don't know. I'm not on the project board anymore.
2026/7. We'll go with.
Somewhere around there.
But we've got to do it. We a university founded with the college system, which is great, absolutely great. But it did mean that we lacked a central student facility. For example, for our student media societies, whose facilities are not necessarily as good as they could be. So we want to see something a bit better for them, but also the spaces in which all sorts of other societies can do their activities. And I know there's a real shortage of the right kind of space. So we want a building with real flexibility inside that can enable students to have those extracurricular aspects of their work. Perhaps a bit of overspill space for studying in particular times of the year.
Can't complain with that.
It's got to be done. It's got to be done.
Absolutely. So that I'm very glad you said that, because that spills over into my final question for you both. And you might not be here, you might. So this is a bit of speculation, but what are you most looking forward to having in the student centre, and why is it the new URY Studios?
It is a Radio Shack, actually. I think it's important reminding people that we have a student society. We're in a studio right now that has bars on the windows.
Yeah, we are a little bit.
And unfortunately, I don't want rotisserie student for dinner. So we do want to look into a new Radio Shack, because we just simply can't have that happen.
I wouldn't complain.
Not complaining.
So yeah, it is the Radio Shack.
Woo!
Yay!
Charlie?
Well, I'm really hopeful that our student media societies can get better facilities. But the one thing I would love to see, and I think there is provision in the plans for it, is a venue for music events of various kinds, club nights, of course, but getting gigs back onto campus. There's Hendrix Hall across there.
Yeah.
Jimi Hendrix played it.
My favourite fact.
Bands used to play in Central Hall until the Boomtown Rats smashed it up. I would love not to have bands smash the place up.
No, naturally.
But to have that kind of life back on campus.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. So thank you very much for coming into the studio and chatting with us. We'll be right back after this song to have a little chat